Hey everybody, David Chatham here with Angel Oak Creative. Excited for another episode of our Nonprofit State of Minds podcast. We've had a lot of fun this year. This is probably our wrap up for 2023, so we're excited about that. And I couldn't think of a better guest to have on to do that than my friend, our president at Angel Oak Creative, Caitlin Clinard Elliott. Welcome, Caitlin.
Oh, thanks, David, so much. Excited to be here today and appreciate all of the participants who have spoken with David in our podcast up to this point. And David, thank you for leading the charge on this initiative.
It has been my pleasure. I feel like I'm kind of being a little selfish by just the only one doing these, but I love them. So thank you for letting me do them, Caitlin.
Absolutely.
It's an honor and a privilege. I know all about Angel Oak Creative, but I've been here for 8 or 9 years now. But some people may not be familiar with Angel Oak Creative and what we do and how we do it. So give just a little bit of a rundown of, what inspired you to start Angel Oak and kind of how we got to where we are today.
Okay. Well, as David mentioned, he has been with us almost since the very beginning, 9 years at this point. But in 2012, which is the year that Angel Oak Creative was founded, I was at a crossroads in my personal life as well as my professional life, and really trying to figure out, what the Lord's will and calling was, what the work was that he had prepared in advance for me to do in the next chapter of my life. I'd just come off the mission field in the Dominican Republic, was back in the States, and, just trying to figure out how to blend work with purpose and meaning. And the Lord just spoke really clearly to me that the mission field is where you are in the present. And that was the first time I had really stopped to think, okay, so there is a mission field here in Raleigh where I am. And where is that? And, through some prayer and reflection, and it didn't take very long for me to realize it's the nonprofit sector. Pre-mission field for me, I had been working with a marketing agency and was just super attracted to the nonprofit clients that we had. And we didn't have many. I mean, a lot of marketing firms, their model is to work with a lot of for-profits and then bring on a few nonprofit clients every year in a pro bono or in-kind, kind of arrangement. And
Right.
So I just loved that nonprofit work so much. And I started just thinking about, is there one? Can I find a marketing firm that works with nonprofits exclusively? And I couldn't. So then the next question was, okay, well, can I create one? Why not? If you feel passionate about something and you can't find it somewhere, I think a lot of people stop short of asking the next question, which could be, is it possible? Should I start one? And that was a proof of concept stage. My sister and I started Angel Oak Creative in 2012. And it was a proof of concept. For the first few years, we had for-profit and nonprofit clients because we had to keep the doors open and the lights on. But it didn't take very long, I'd say the beginning of year 3, for us to really put a stake in the ground and serve only nonprofit clients exclusively, with the belief that nonprofits have the power to change the world.
Yeah.
And what a privilege it is to walk alongside of them in doing that. And then also with the belief that you get what you pay for. If nonprofits are trying to tackle the most challenging issues in our community, and, they shouldn't be doing that with fundraising communications tools and promotional marketing items that are free. I mean, if they will invest, the return should, in theory, be greater.
Yeah.
And that proof of concept really just took off. We're in year 12, and I think we'll serve, 120 nonprofit clients this year.
Wow.
Which is so fun. And David, we get to do this work together every day.
I know, right?
So, I'm preaching to the choir here, and if I'm forgetting something, please jump in.
No, you're doing great. Yeah, I mean, it's, so over the course of this last few years, as someone who also participates in the nonprofit sector as a board member and other areas, and a donor and all of those things, what are some lessons that you've learned in that time about business, about working with nonprofits, any of those things, wherever that question leads you?
Yeah, wow, that could lead a number of directions. But I don't think this will come as a surprise to anyone that the nonprofit leaders are some of the most passionate, hardworking, workers that we have in any sector. And I think so much of that is driven by just a meaning behind the work that they wake up every day to do. At Angel Oak Creative, it didn't take us long to figure out that the hero or heroes of our story are actually the nonprofit leaders, the workers who are on the front line doing the work. It's not sexy work all the time. It's hard. It's taxing.
All the time. How about any of the time?
Any of the time, right? I mean, that's a good point. It's the hardest work out there. And for anyone to sign up to do that day in and day out requires more than just a mindset of clocking in and clocking out. You have to have the passion for it. And I think you also really have to believe you can make change, make a difference, that, there is power in good. And been so inspired by and learned so much from a work ethic perspective and a leadership perspective from the nonprofit sector. As a small business, Angel Oak Creative has evolved over the years, but also had to figure out how to do more with less sometimes, right? How to work smarter, not harder. And another place that I have learned so much, David, you just mentioned this, was, through board service.
Yeah.
And that would kind of be my challenge or charge to anyone listening to this podcast. A lot of times we feel like the most impactful gift that we can give to a nonprofit is our funds, right? Or our time, our volunteer time, our treasure. To me, serving on a nonprofit board and multiple at this point in my career, it's just taught me so much, because you're around the table with a lot of other leaders who are all bringing the wisdom and lessons they've learned from business to the table. And in the past decade, it's just been really encouraging, at least locally, but I know this is kind of a national conversation, an international conversation, is that nonprofits, need to operate as businesses. I mean, they really do. They need to have operating platforms. They need to be able to invest in those overhead expenses like staff and leadership and infrastructure, solve the biggest problems in the world and in our community. We need to throw as many resources as we can out there, and we need to be able to attract talent, the most talented professionals in the field, to serve in the nonprofit sector. And you can't do that if you're not able to offer market rate. Again, preaching to the choir for a lot of you here. If the money's not there, the money's not there. But I guess the third lesson that I've probably learned is just to have the perspective of the mindset of abundance, right?
Yeah.
I feel like when I was entering the nonprofit space, this was a misperception of my own, but probably also the dialogue that I was surrounded by. It was like nonprofits are competing with each other to get this limited amount of funds every year. And that's a mindset of scarcity, but that's, the abundance, a mindset of abundance, having that really actually opens you up to collaborative partnerships with others, to sharing best practices, and just believing that what's going to go around will come around. And I've seen that happen time and time again. So kind of rambled there, David, but
no, you're great. No, that was good. This year we focused, or, part of our theme this year was a nonprofit, the state of nonprofits, right?
Yep.
And I'm wearing been there, done that. I got the t-shirt for those that can see. We've got our North Carolina nonprofit t-shirt. We went to some conferences this year. We've worked with 120 nonprofits. You've talked to nonprofit executive directors and development directors. What's your take on the state of nonprofits in North Carolina right now? How would you characterize that?
I think that the nonprofit sector is one of the most vibrant sectors that we as a state have. I mean, the number of people the sector employs, the amount of talent the sector attracts, the impact the sector is making on the communities. It's so impressive. But then I'd also say, as a state in a country, I just feel like, and a lot of this is just gut, right? But I just feel like in North Carolina, we have really engaged communities.
Yeah.
And, so much so that maybe we take it for granted.
Mm.
But I go to these, other places across the country, and it just doesn't seem like the nonprofit sector is necessarily part of the fabric of the state. And I
Yeah.
would say the exact opposite here in North Carolina. I mean, nonprofits are the fabric of our state, the backbone of our state. I
Yeah.
look at not only the nonprofit leaders, but also the board members of nonprofits in our state. And I mean, it is that just the stakeholders in our communities are stepping up to represent these nonprofits. I mean, it's just, a spectrum of skill sets and individuals from all walks of life. I just feel like it's the melting pot sector almost of
Yeah.
our state. And there's definitely some conversations around the table about whether our state has too many nonprofits. There's
Yeah.
definitely conversation about, would it be wiser to combine some of these nonprofit causes that are trying to achieve the same thing and just have strength in numbers? And I understand that dialogue as well. I don't think more is always better. I don't think
Right.
I don't think our state of nonprofits is stronger because we have so many nonprofits.
Right.
I think it's really the investments of the communities and the engagement of the communities behind those nonprofits that makes them special. So that was a long way of saying, I think the state of nonprofits in North Carolina is strong and healthy.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been interesting to get out to these conferences this year with the NC Center for Nonprofits, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, here in North Carolina, and I thought both of those conferences had really good turnouts. I thought that they really people were engaged and interested in what was happening. I think, they felt some sense of uncertainty. Our economy is in a weird place. Our, political spectrum is in a weird place.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of cultural issues that are happening, and I think it's causing some, just some fear, some concern, some uncertainty. But overwhelmingly, I felt like everybody was, on board and engaged in conversations about how do we make this better? How do we keep working harder, smarter and not harder? And just, what are we doing to improve that? So, working with 120 clients, and as our president here at Angel Oak, you have likely spoken to each one of those at least once over the course of this year, probably, whether it's through onboarding or in some other discussion.
Yeah.
What are they expressing? Any sort of, opinions or concerns or particular things that they're talking about that you can kind of sense a trend or a pattern of anything that you felt you could identify?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly just an undercurrent of concern about what the economy holds in store in 2024. But that's not very different from how we entered 2023. At the end of 2022, there was concern about it. And giving has held pretty steady. Looks like Giving Tuesday, which was just a few days ago, 3 days ago from this podcast, held steady, increased by what, 1%? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I think
Dan?
it was just a little under 1%. We were at, I think they said 3.1 billion, and it was up by 20 million the year from the
Yeah.
year before. So just, under a percent increase. So,
Yep.
a little flat, but still up. So on the,
But still, but not down. And I think that
right.
that's what's
And
really
last
important.
year, as I think we talked about briefly, was that last year was a record. So
It was
we're slightly up from the record of last
from
year.
the
So,
record coming
yeah,
out of I still think a lot of nonprofits are, well, I mean, one thing that, and I don't want to harp on COVID too much. It's 2023, so we're moving
let's move
on.
on,
And
please.
yeah, but so many nonprofits had to pivot and adapt during
Yeah,
COVID. And what I've seen is it's actually opened up a lot more opportunity for nonprofits who were forced to go into the digital space and are now offering their services digitally. And
yeah,
I do think that that is allowing nonprofits to reach more people, or at least to go one to many, as opposed to just, serving one-offs. And I've seen that with multiple nonprofits who have come through our doors this year, taking their curriculum into an online medium. And I think that that probably would not have happened as quickly if it wasn't forced. So silver lining there for sure.
Well, one of the trends that we did look at as we were kind of preparing for this conversation was donor retention is down, right? And the
Yep.
ability to retain those donors and needing the need to acquire new ones to keep the pipeline full. We work with our clients every day on engaging and communicating with their donors, their supporters. We haven't done any, and it might be interesting for us to look at any of our clients and their donor retention rates just to see if they're any better or worse than others. But, what are some things that you've learned in working with our clients that have helped to, secure more long-term relationships with donors? I think that because, I think the average donor retention rate, I think, is in the 40s now, which is relatively low. That means you're only retaining a little more than 4 out of 10 of your donors, right, that are coming in. So I don't know, what have you seen that have been some tools that might be helpful for donors, or just some strategies even that might be helpful for donors to take an approach that increases their retention?
Yeah, I think we've encouraged a lot of our clients just over the years. I'm going to say this again, that more isn't more, right? Sometimes less is more.
Right.
And it's not so much about the quantity of donors that you have as it is the quality and the
Yeah.
depth of those relationships. We've been working with several of our larger nonprofit clients on major donor programs and initiatives that really deepen the relationships with that segment of donors who, have potential to give at a high level and even give more than they currently have. And so that's, instead of just having, and this is not something we've ever really encouraged, there is a time and a place for mass communication, right?
Right.
But making sure that you're not overlooking that segmented communication to the most critical stakeholders to your mission. I think a lot of these donor numbers probably became a little inflated. I'm going to say during COVID again, but I think that's true. I think a lot of people were online and they were giving small gifts to new nonprofits, and that's awesome. I don't think that you're going to retain all those, and I think that's okay. But, we do work with clients on lapsed donor strategies as well. I mean, they're not, just because they haven't given in this calendar year doesn't necessarily mean they're lost. We would say they're lapsed. And how do we continue to get in front of them and really understand, if their passions are still with your mission or not. And if they're not, it's okay, bless and release. That's fine.
Right.
Again, spirit of a mindset of abundance, right?
Yeah.
But I would say major donor strategies have been a really large focus of ours this year.
Yeah. And I think, I've also seen how do we cultivate those middle level donors, right, to because likely a middle level donor has the capacity to give more, right? I mean, even if
Yeah,
it's a couple of $100 more, or maybe $1,000 more, which can add up pretty quickly if you can keep them engaged and all. So looking
right.
at that middle as um, a farming opportunity, a breeding
Yeah,
ground for larger donors, I think people underestimate the ability of people and the capacity of people to give, right?
yeah, I would agree. And again, I think that this whole like major donor, mid-level donor, like the definition of what that even means is different for all
Yeah,
nonprofits. I mean, some of our nonprofits, $1,000 gifts are major donor gifts,
that's
right?
right.
Some of them are $5,000 gifts. So
Yeah,
it just really depends on the size of your nonprofit. But I do think as you find other opportunities to deepen relationships, and that's not just not, and well, I'm not just talking about a call once or twice a year that thanks
right.
somebody for their gift and asks them to make more. I'm talking about finding ways for these people to get involved, to
Yeah,
serve on boards, to serve on committees, to make connections for you in the community through introducing you to their networks. I mean, there are creative ways to think about how to go deeper with donors than just their pockets.
yeah,
And I think what we have found is that if you can go deeper with them in other ways, that the pockets open up.
yeah. Um,
um, yeah.
and the other part of this, we've been engaged with a number of capital campaigns this year, which to me says that people aren't too scared, right? Because some of these campaigns are
Yeah.
trying to raise 30-50 million dollars,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
for our clients, those are large, most of our clients, those are larger sums of money. um,
Oh yeah.
what have you learned from some of that work for people who might be considering entering into a capital campaign in the next year or two? What are some
Hmm.
lessons you've learned there? Because I know you've been involved in both as a board member and as an Angel Oak, member, in those kinds of
Yeah.
campaigns lately.
Well, I think it all comes down to knowing your community and doing a feasibility study. I mean, over the past, I'll just broaden this to 2 years, David. We've had clients come through our doors who are really interested in doing a capital campaign and they've not done a feasibility study. We've had clients come in who have asked us to help them do a feasibility study to determine whether the community is ready. And then we've had other clients come in with feasibility studies that show, yes, this community is ready to give upwards of $30 million. And so what I'd say is it's red flag is a strong term, but we're always, when we have prospects coming through asking about capital campaign work, Angel Oak Creative is always asking whether there's a feasibility study. And if there's not, we really try to dig a little deeper and say, okay, hold on, there probably needs to be at some level, right? A a phase of research within your giving communities to see how
Right.
much they will raise for you. We've
Yeah.
had, and not all feasibility studies that we've done or been a part of or even inherited um, are saying that these nonprofits can raise the amount that they were hoping to.
Yeah.
There are also feasibility studies that say they can, and I don't think it's necessarily um, I don't think that the geography of the nonprofit is actually what's determining that, more so than the mission and the community need at the time and the awareness or lack thereof of that
Yeah.
community need. I mean, we had one client who did a feasibility study in a small, more rural county, right? I mean, not a metropolitan spot. And they were trying to raise capital campaign dollars for homelessness, and the community just really didn't see homelessness as an issue.
Wow. Yeah.
And that was a misperception because that is an issue. But
Right.
if the community isn't aware of it, then you got to do an awareness initiative first.
Right.
So I think it's just knowing what you're working with before you take the plunge. I think that that's the most important thing, is to do your due diligence and your research. And I mean, we are people of faith at Angel Oak Creative. So I'm certainly not trying to undermine the fact that sometimes you just got to take leaps of faith
Yeah,
and
yeah.
trust that the Lord is going to show up. But there's also an amount of prudence that we need to do as well.
Seeking wise counsel, right? It's always
Yes.
a good thing too. So,
Yeah.
well, good. Well, we're wrapping up the year.
Yeah.
We've given partnered with Town Bank and folks like Bay Six this year and given away some money to nonprofits across the state. We kicked off in I guess it was January or so. We started out at the Outer Banks, got to do
Mhm.
some giving there and down in Wilmington, and we got to give some money in Charlotte and Raleigh, and didn't get too far out west, but I think we did a good job of covering the state. And what
Mhm.
we've got Angel Oak Cares here. I mean, what motivates you to want to be generous with your business? This I know
Mhm.
you believe God gave you this business, but what you
Yep.
also are making decisions about giving much of that or some of that each year back to the community. What motivates you to do that?
Yeah. I mean, a number of
I know
things,
you
and
don't
most
like to talk about yourself in that way, but suck it
not
up, Caitlin. You
particularly,
can
but
you can do it.
I will talk about, you know, whose it all is to begin with, right? And then what inspires us. So, I mean, I think our mindset at Angelo Creative is that to whom much is given, much is expected, and what we've been given isn't really ours
Yeah,
anyway. And we're just being entrusted with it as stewards. And that to me is so resonates so well with nonprofit giving, because I know all of our nonprofit clients and not clients, all nonprofits are being entrusted with funds from their donors and expected to be really good stewards of them. So we see the provision that Angel Oak has through the exact same lens, and it's a privilege to be generous, and it also keeps us motivated to continue growing. Third time I'll say this on the podcast, more isn't always more. And so I think our leadership team at Angel Oak Creative isn't really driven by, growth for growth's sake.
yeah.
Um, we want to love our little corner of the world and love it well. And if growing means that we can be more generous, now you're talking. Now there's some motivation to continue growing, at least for our makeup and our leadership team's makeup. Um, and the other thing I will say about just the being inspired towards generosity is back to the heroes of our story at Angelo Creative. I watch nonprofit, not just leaders, but nonprofit staff, people on the front lines doing this work day in and day out. And I watch the level of generosity and compassion that they have for the work that they do.
Yeah.
Not always for recognition, right? And not always for the greatest compensation, but the reward isn't necessarily financial for them. The reward is making a difference and changing the world one person at a time. And so, I mean, when you are surrounded by compassion and generosity, to the level that we are at Angel Oak Creative, it's just contagious. I mean, we can't not give back what we've been given
Yeah.
in as many ways as we can. So, and it's also, I've noticed, I mean, this is kind of taking it from a business perspective, and flipping the mirror back onto us. But what I have seen is that being generous as a company has inspired our employees.
I was
Um,
about to say that. Yeah.
yeah, to just grit it out. Grit is one of our values, and so is generosity. But I think the grit comes, uh, I mean, I think that they go hand in hand. I think,
Yeah.
generosity keeps our grit going, and the grit that we have continues to help us do well and be able to be generous. So it's
Well,
a gift all around.
Well, I know as part of that team that gets to be generous with some of Angel Oak's earnings and all that we love this time of year. We Giving Tuesday was great, where we were able to make some donations to our clients and others in the nonprofit sector and all of
Yeah.
that. So thank you for your generosity and being
Yeah.
willing to have that be contagious with the
Well,
team.
that's one thing we love to do. And I would encourage all companies listening to this podcast on Giving Tuesday, we give a certain amount to each Angelo Creative employee to then gift to the nonprofit or nonprofits of their choice. And they don't have to be clients, but it's sweet seeing your employees want to give to your clients because that means they believe in the missions. But that usually every year I hear from some of our employees that, that's their most favorite email to get every year is the email that says, okay, now it's your turn to give. Here's the amount you pick. It's just beautiful to be able to share that. So,
yeah. We just did. Go ahead.
I think you're going there.
Yeah. So we just gave, in partnership with Town Bank and Basics, we just did a $7,500 giveaway for end of year. We had 70 or so entrants of that. And all we did was ask them to say in 100 words or less, or in a 1-minute video, how this money would impact their organization. And, we did this last year, we did it this year. And, I'm always impressed with the entrants and their entry of what they think or what that money will do for them. So what was that experience for you? Because you read and watched all 70 of those entrants along with me and Catherine at Basics and some others. So what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it just slowing down and being reminded of why we do what we do is the fuel that will keep us going, right? And we're worn out at the end of the year. I mean, I think probably everybody is. And we're crossing this finish line, and excited about it. But being able to pause, which I feel like is really difficult to do in today's age, and just spend 2 hours listening or reading 70 different nonprofits, explaining what they do, what their impact is, how they would use a gift of $7,500. It just poured fuel on the fire for me to keep going. It's beautiful. And every mission is so different, but they are also so unique. They're also very similar in that what I found the fabric throughout all of them is that every nonprofit is trying to change the world.
Yeah.
One person at a time, one cause at a time. And to be a part of that work is just, it really is a privilege. And the most exciting part to me of that giveaway, other than having 70 plus applicants, thank you if you were one of those, and other than being able to announce the winner, Seasons Village, and call up the executive director and share, that was so fun. But David, you actually personally reached out to all 70 of the applicants to share with them, to thank them for their time, but to also share with them who the winner was. And the responses we got from, in this case, losers, even though there are no losers in the nonprofit community, but the response that we got from nonprofits who applied and did not receive the giveaway, when they found out who did receive it, just blew me away. I mean, it was the greatest, to me, the spirit of camaraderie and cheerleading and mindset of abundance. I mean, to be a nonprofit leader saying, you know what, Seasons Village deserves it. I cannot wait to see what they do with it. Their mission is incredible. I mean, that's, it doesn't really get much better than that.
And we actually had one nonprofit turn around and give us a gift and they didn't win.
Yeah, we did. The gift of giving, right? I mean, I'm telling you, it's contagious.
I mean, it was, I wasn't surprised. I certainly expect that from our community in many ways, but it was very encouraging to see the grace of those nonprofits and those leaders who, didn't get the opportunity, and they took the time to say it right too. So that meant a lot.
Not just think it, say it. And it's leaders spurring other leaders on. And so, back to the whole question of what do I think the state of nonprofits is in North Carolina? I think it's strong. I think it's healthy. I think it's unified. I think that we are all better together, and
Yeah.
there is a lot of power in good, and that, nonprofits are cheering each other on.
Well, you mentioned a lot of power and good, and we're going, as we
I
wrap up
did.
this conversation, next year, just a little tease for what we're going to talk about next year is the power of good, the power of nonprofits, and what does that mean to you? To as we enter into this idea of putting a spotlight on the power of good, the power of nonprofits. Why did that get you a little excited about next year's theme?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why Ted Lasso came to mind, but it just did. If you think about Ted Lasso and how the world embraced good and kindness, I think that we are hungry for it. I mean, and I do believe that, human beings at the end of the day, that's what we long for in our souls, right?
Yeah.
Is good and truth and love, because that was our creator's intent. And so power and good, I mean, I think it's believing that you can be the change you want to see in the world, that you can make a difference, and that it's really just about the person right in front of you. It's about the next person who you can impact. It's not necessarily about how many, right? You don't count it's not the, gosh, well, I just blanked out on the saying, but
That's
I
fine.
think you know where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Like, stop counting the days, make the days count. Stop counting,
Right.
the number of people you're trying to impact, and just make the one person you're impacting count. And if we
Right.
all just did that a little bit more, man, this world would be a better place. So,
Amen. Well,
it's also fun to just think about
go ahead.
just the power of good, like superhero powers. What is your power? I mean, all these nonprofits, and now I'm reminded of conference that I was invited to speak at, Mission Triangle Conference, where we brought together 200 plus business owners to try or just to inspire them to use their businesses for good. I just remember one of the panelists, Jared Plummer, founder of Two Roosters Ice Cream, saying you got to know what your currency is. We all have a currency, and his is ice cream, right? And Angel Creatives is marketing, but maybe not just marketing. I mean, I think our currency is the treasure that Angel Oak Cares is able to gift every year. But we all have a currency of good that we can use. And so it's just figuring out what it is and how to use it. And the opportunity is right in front of you. Really is.
Yeah.
Just got to open our eyes.
That's great. Yeah. And
why
I
are
think
you excited about it?
What's that?
Why are you excited about it? The power of good.
I mean, it just, to me, I think a lot of folks maybe outside the sector take nonprofits for granted a little bit. I think, being able to shine a light on them as heroes, even though they probably wouldn't think of themselves as heroes,
right.
But
or don't want the acknowledgement, the recognition.
Yeah, but that they do. I mean, we've seen, lives changed in every way. I mean, from our work in recovery and addiction, of people whose lives are saved literally because, our client is able to be there with Narcan, right? Or with training. We've seen lives changed in Haiti, where they rescued, dozens of children with HIV out of the clutches of a gang that had already murdered two of their peers, right? And some of it's not that dramatic, right? It's just the single mom getting a chance to provide diapers for their child, right? I mean, just those sorts of things are powerful, and just, those are the things that, to me, are changing the world. And it may not be universal in the sense that it's taking over and everyone's changing, but it is changing it one person at a time, one life at a time, and hopefully one community at a time, that we're able to just empower and equip our nonprofits to better, to increase their impact, right? And just to increase the way that they're able to work. So, I'm hoping that what we're able to do next year with this idea of the power of good, that the power of nonprofits is to really just inspire people, inspire nonprofit leaders to really appreciate that power and to unleash it, even more so. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited about it. As we wrap up, any last thing you want to let our listeners know about? These are hopefully some nonprofit leaders listening today, and hopefully they stuck with us to the end here. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave them with?
Oh man, we believe in you. Thank you for the work that you do. I know that the end of the year is a really busy, exhausting time of trying to cross that finish line and hit your annual fund goals. And just remember that this community is behind you, and that, there is an abundance out there of resources, and that you can do it. Keep your heads down. 2024 is going to be an amazing year. We don't know what we don't know. We can't predict, the unknown. So just keep doing more of what you're doing. And thank you so much for changing the world.
Well, and how can people learn more about Angel Oak Creative? We'll throw a shameless plug out there as well.
Well, you can check out our website, angeloakcreative.com. And from there, you can get to our social channels, or you can just go to Facebook or Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all three of those and pretty active. You could join our newsletter by going to our website, and then you can, keep up with all the things, Angel Oak Creative, but also thought leadership and marketing tips and fundraising tips. Did I forget anything, David?
I think that's it. You covered it pretty well. Thank everybody for listening today. We're so grateful for your time. You can catch our other podcast episodes where you're listening to this one, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all of those. And if you have an idea for a future episode, we'd love to hear that. You can email me at david@angeloakcreative.com. Otherwise, just thanks everybody for listening. Thank you, Caitlin Clinard Elliott, for being on the show and for all you do for Angel Oak and for our nonprofit sector.
No, thank you, David Chatham, for everything you do for Angel Oak and our nonprofit sector. And one last parting message: Merry Christmas.